At the airport for our family trip, my son's ticket was cancelled. My wife's mom laughed. Too many people, so we left your kid behind. My wife giggled. A trip for real family after all. My son cried. Dad, I want to go too. Silently, I took his hand and walked away. Later they came to me in tears, begging for help. The airport was alive with the buzz of early morning travelers, rolling suitcases gliding across the polished floors, the smell of fresh coffee wafting through the air. Excitement crackled around me, families laughing, children pressing their faces against the towering windows, pointing at the planes. It was supposed to be a smooth departure. I had double-checked everything. Yet when I handed over our passports, the agent frowned. I'm sorry, sir, but I don't see a ticket for your son. Confused, I turned to Margaret, expecting shock or at least an apology. Instead, she smirked. Too many people, so we left your kid behind. I looked to Olivia, hoping she would correct her mother, but she only giggled, linking arms with Margaret. A trip for real family after all. Liam's small hand clutched mine, his voice trembling. Dad, I want to go too. I felt something inside me go cold. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I simply took his hand and walked away. Behind me, their laughter lingered, careless and cruel. They thought they had won. They thought I would accept this. They were wrong. Clutching my hand tightly, his small fingers warm and trusting, Liam stood beside me, his backpack stuffed with treasures. A worn-out dinosaur plushie, a half-filled coloring book, and the crumpled brochure of Hawaii he had carried everywhere, his heart set on sandy beaches and ocean waves. His excitement shimmered like sunlight on water, bright and uncontainable. But beside me, Olivia, his mother, was a stark contrast. She stood detached, lost in the glow of her phone screen, her lips curved in a knowing smirk. And then there was Victoria, her mother, the self-appointed queen of control, standing tall and proud, her eyes sweeping across the crowd as if surveying subjects beneath her station. Even here, amid the chaos of travel, she carried herself like royalty, her presence demanding deference. We reached the check-in counter, where I slid our passports and boarding passes across the sleek surface, expecting a smooth process. The attendant scanned them, her expression shifting. From routine professionalism to confusion, her brow knitting together. I'm sorry, sir, she said hesitantly, eyes flicking between the screen and our documents. Something in her voice made my chest tighten. I don't see a ticket for your son. A cold weight settled in my stomach. That didn't make sense. I had confirmed the bookings twice. Before I could speak, Victoria let out a chuckle, a sharp, dismissive sound. There were just too many of us, she said, waving a manicured hand as if brushing away a minor inconvenience. So we decided your kid should stay behind. The world tilted. Liam's grip on my hand tightened, his little voice barely above a whisper. That I want to go too. His words were small, fragile, yet they echoed louder than anything in the bustling terminal. Beside Victoria, Olivia giggled, looping her arm through her mother's as though they shared an inside joke. It's a trip for real family after all, she mused, her voice dripping with amusement. Real family. The words struck like a blade, slicing through flesh and bone, straight to the core of everything I believed in. Liam's wide eyes shimmered with unshed tears, his innocence crumbling under the weight. The betrayal. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I didn't demand an explanation. I simply reached down, took my son's hand and turned away. And as we walked, their laughter trailed behind us. A cruel, hollow sound that would haunt them long after they realized the mistake they had just made. I had confirmed the booking twice. I knew it was right. It had to be. Yet when I turned to Victoria, expecting confusion, maybe even a half-hearted apology, all I got was a smirk. A slow, satisfied smirk that curled her lips like a cat toying with its prey. With a flick of her perfectly manicured fingers, she dismissed my concern as if swatting away an annoying fly. Oh, there were just too many of us, she said, her voice light, almost amused. So we decided your kid should stay behind. The words hit like a thunderclap, loud and devastating, yet she spoke them with the ease of someone commenting on the weather. My chest tightened, my breath hitching in disbelief. Liam's small hand clenched around mine, his fingers digging in as if he sensed the storm raging inside me. I turned to Olivia, my last hope, expecting her to correct her mother, to stand up for our son, to at least show some semblance of maternal instinct. But she didn't. She didn't gasp in horror. She didn't protest. She didn't even look ashamed. Instead, she giggled, a soft, sweet poison sound, and looped her arm through Victoria's, tilting her head up to smile at her mother as if they were co-conspirators in some cruel joke. It's a trip for real family after all, she mused, her voice dripping with amusement. Real family. The words cut like a blade, sharper than I ever thought possible. My wife. The woman who had carried my child, who had held him in her arms, who who was supposed to love him unconditionally, was leaving him behind without a second thought. Liam's voice was small, trembling, barely more than a whisper. That, I want to go too. His little fingers clutched my sleeve, his wide, innocent eyes brimming with tears, searching mine for an answer, for reassurance, for something, anything, that would make sense of this nightmare. Something inside me broke. Not with rage, not with fury. No, what settled in my chest was something colder, sharper, more dangerous. A realization. A decision. Victoria sighed dramatically, rolling her eyes like this was nothing more than an overreaction to a minor inconvenience. Oh, don't be so sensitive. He'll be fine. They were laughing. Olivia giggled again, whispering something to her mother as if I were some dramatic fool for daring to care about my own son. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I didn't raise my voice. I simply reached down, took Liam's hand and turned away. And as we walked, their laughter trailed behind us. A hollow, haunting sound that would follow them long after they realized they had just made the worst mistake of their lives. We sat in the terminal, the noise of the airport a distant hum against the weight pressing on my chest. Liam curled up beside me, his little body trembling, his small hands still clutching his backpack as if it was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. I looked down at Liam and it felt as if the earth had cracked open beneath me, swallowing me whole. My heart ached in ways I never knew were possible, as if someone had reached inside my chest and squeezed the life out of it. He didn't understand. How could he? How do you explain the unexplainable? How do you tell a child, your child, that the woman who had once cradled him in her arms, who had whispered lullabies into his tiny ears, had now decided he wasn't important enough to be part of her life? That he had been discarded like an unwanted extra in the perfect picture she had curated for herself? Dad. His voice was soft, hesitant, a fragile thing teetering on the edge of heartbreak. I swallowed past the lump in my throat and turned to him. Yeah, buddy. His tiny hand wiped at his nose with the sleeve of his too big hoodie, his breath hitching in his chest. Did I do something bad? The words shattered me. My entire body tensed as if bracing for a blow. I knelt before him, gripping his small shoulders with both hands, forcing him to meet my eyes. No, Liam. No, I said firmly, my voice thick with emotion. You didn't do anything wrong. This isn't about you. This is about them. His lower lip quivered, his hands curling into fists around the straps of his backpack. Then why didn't they want me to come? I sucked in a breath, steadying myself because he deserved honesty even if it hurt. Because they don't understand what real family is, I said, brushing away a tear that had slipped down his cheek. But I do. At that moment something inside me shifted, solidified. I made a silent promise, one deeper than words could ever convey. I would never let my son feel unwanted again. I would show him what real love looked like, love without conditions, love without selfishness. I would teach him the difference between people who take and people who give. I reached into my pocket, pulling out my phone. Liam sniffled, looking up at me with eyes still clouded with confusion. Who are you calling? I gave him a small smile, one that held the weight of 1,000 decisions. Someone who knows what real family is. 30 minutes later, we weren't boarding a flight to Hawaii. We weren't heading to the destination that had been planned, that had been stripped from us by selfishness. No, we were on a plane to Disney World. As I watched my son's face light up with wonder, his sorrow melting into pure excitement, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Freedom. Olivia thought she had won. She thought she could take out consequence. She thought she could discard us like yesterday's news, move on without a second thought. But she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. Because this wasn't just about revenge. This was about justice. Liam's quiet sobs had been the only sound I could hear as we moved through the bustling airport, even as the world around us blurred with movement. Families laughing, the wheels of luggage clicking against polished floors, announcements echoing through the terminal. None of it mattered. All I could focus on was the way his small fingers clutched my hand, how his shoulders trembled with each breath he took. Why didn't they want me to come, Dad? His voice was barely a whisper, but the weight of it crushed me, an anvil pressing against my chest. I stopped walking, kneeling before him once more, my hands on his tiny arms, grounding both of us. His big, innocent eyes were filled with a pain no child should ever have to feel, a confusion that no words could truly ease. He gripped the straps of his backpack so tightly that his knuckles turned white, as if holding on to it would somehow keep him from falling apart. They don't understand what real family is, son, I said, my voice gentle but firm. I wiped another tear from his cheek, my fingers lingering there, offering warmth where others had given him nothing but cold indifference. But I do. And I'm going to prove it to you. Liam blinked up at me, his tiny face still etched with doubt. He wanted to believe me. But how could he? He had just been abandoned by his own mother. cast aside like an afterthought. I reached into my pocket, my fingers curling around my phone like a lifeline, a bridge between despair and something better. Liam sniffled beside me, his breath unsteady, his small body still shaking from the weight of betrayal. His voice, fragile yet laced with curiosity, broke through the thick silence between us. "Who are you calling?" he asked, his words trembling like a leaf caught in the wind. I forced a smile, a flicker of light in the storm that had become our reality. "Someone who knows what real family is," I said simply, pressing a button and lifting the phone to my ear. The dial tone rang in my ear, a signal of change, of something new, of something better. A different destination. A different future point. 30 minutes later, we weren't standing in line for a flight to Hawaii, a place that now felt tainted, soaked in the cold shadows of abandonment. Instead, we stood at a different airline counter, a fresh start unfolding before us. "2 tickets to Orlando, please," I said, my voice steady, resolute. The woman behind the desk typed swiftly, then glanced up with a warm smile. "Flying to Disney World?" she asked, her tone bright, as if she could sense the shift in our story, as if she knew that this moment, this decision, was about more than just a trip. It was about rewriting a narrative. I looked down at Liam, his cheeks still stained with drying tears, his little fists gripping the straps of his backpack. Sadness still lingered in his eyes, but there, beneath the grief, was a flicker of something else. A spark. A question. A possibility. "Yeah," I said, squeezing his tiny hand. "We are." Liam's lips parted in surprise, his small fingers loosening their desperate grip as realization began to sink in. "Really?" His voice was barely a whisper, a mix of disbelief and fragile hope. I nodded. "Really?" The woman handed us our tickets, and as I took them I saw it. The shift, the transformation, the light beginning to return to my son's eyes. Hope. It was small, flickering like the first star at dusk, but it was there. And it was real. By the time we boarded the plane, the sorrow that had once weighed so heavily on him had begun to lift, piece by piece, moment by moment. He pressed his face against the window, his little feet kicking against the seat, his hands wrapped tightly around his beloved stuffed dinosaur. He turned to me, his eyes wide, glimmering with something new, something untouched by pain. "Dad," he asked, his voice filled with the innocent wonder of a child finally allowed to dream again, "do you think Mickey Mouse will remember me?" I chuckled, my chest tightening, not with sadness but with something warm, something right. "Of course, buddy," I said, ruffling his hair. "He's been waiting for you." And just like that, the pain that Olivia and Victoria had inflicted began to drown beneath something far more powerful, something real. Of a lifetime. When we landed in Orlando, the warmth of the Florida sun wrapped around us like an embrace, melting away the last remnants of sorrow that had clung to Liam like a second skin. He stepped out of the airport, his small face tilting upward, his eyes widening at the sight of palm trees swaying lazily in the breeze, at the colorful Disney banners fluttering against the sky. "This is way better than Hawaii," he exclaimed, his voice filled with a joy so pure, so untainted that I couldn't help but laugh. "Told you," I said, nudging him playfully. And the moment we stepped through the gates of Disney World, I knew I had made the right choice. The weight that had been pressing on Liam for weeks evaporated the second he spotted Mickey Mouse in the distance. "Dad, look," he shouted, pointing excitedly, his face lighting up with pure, unfiltered happiness. Before I could say a word, he was already running, his little backpack bouncing against his back, his arms stretched out as if he were reaching for something bigger than just a character in a costume. He was reaching for a childhood he had almost lost. Followed behind, watching as Mickey turned, his arms opening wide, and Liam ran straight into them. He melted into the hug, his small hands gripping tightly as if for the first time in weeks he truly felt safe. And for the first time in a long, long time he was smiling. Really smiling. I felt something in my chest that had been missing for far too long. Happiness. That day we rode every roller coaster we could find, our laughter echoing through the park like music. We ate way too much cotton candy, our fingers sticky, our stomachs aching from too many sweets, and even more laughter. Liam screamed with delight as we soared through Space Mountain, his voice lost in the whirlwind of speed and exhilaration. He waved excitedly at the parade floats, his eyes sparkling beneath the glow of the fireworks, 1,000 colors bursting in the sky above us. He ran through the park, his Mickey ears slightly crooked, his little legs moving faster than I had ever seen, his laughter filling the air like music. And for the first time in years I was finally free. I wasn't thinking about Olivia. I wasn't thinking about Victoria. I wasn't thinking about the betrayal, the cruelty, the injustice of it all. My mind was consumed by one thing. This moment. The sound of Liam's laughter, the warmth of his small body leaning against mine, the way his eyes sparkled as he looked up at the fireworks exploding in the night sky. He wasn't thinking about the pain anymore. He wasn't thinking about the mother who had abandoned him at an airport without a second thought. He wasn't thinking about the woman who had laughed as he cried. No, in this moment he was just a little boy, free, happy, loved. He rested his head against my shoulder, his voice soft, sleepy, but full of something I hadn't heard in so long. Peace. Dad, he whispered. Yeah, buddy. I murmured, wrapping an arm around him, feeling the way he melted into the comfort of my embrace. This is the best trip ever, he sighed, the words carrying a weight far greater than he could understand. I smiled, pressing a kiss to the top of his head. Yeah, it is, I said, and I meant it. Because this wasn't just a vacation, it was a promise. A vow. An unbreakable, unwavering commitment. A promise that I would never let anyone make my son feel unwanted again. A promise that I would show him that real love didn't come with conditions. A promise that I would never, ever let him down the way his mother had. And while Olivia was off sipping expensive cocktails in Hawaii, draped in designer outfits, her laughter echoing through private resorts, her fake smiles plastered across her social media feed, she had no idea she had already lost. Because real family isn't about money. It isn't about luxury resorts or social media likes. It's about moments like this, where a father holds his son close beneath a sky painted with fireworks, where he listens to his child's steady breaths as he drifts into sleep, where he knows without a doubt that this right here, is what truly matters. Later that night back at the hotel, Liam slept soundly in the giant bed, his stuffed dinosaur tucked under his arm, his small fingers still curled into the fabric as if holding onto the warmth of a day well spent. I sat by the window, staring out at the shimmering city lights of Orlando, my phone heavy in my hand. A deep breath filled my lungs as I unlocked the screen and checked my messages. Nothing. No missed calls. No messages. No concern. Not from Olivia. Not from Victoria. Not even a poorly crafted excuse for why they had abandoned their own child. Silence. And in that moment I knew, this wasn't just a moment of clarity. This was a decision. Olivia thought she had control. She thought she could dictate who was worthy of being part of her world. She thought she could laugh at my son's pain and walk away without consequence. He was wrong. Because this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about Liam. And I was going to make sure that when karma came knocking she wouldn't see it coming. While Liam and I were creating real memories filled with laughter, love, and something pure, something real, Olivia and Victoria were living in a carefully curated illusion. I knew them too well. Olivia, obsessed with appearances, would be carefully curating her social media feed. Perfectly angled selfies by the pool, videos of extravagant dinners, group photos with Victoria and their so-called family, all smiling, all pretending. But something was missing. And their followers noticed. It started small, the first cracks in the facade. A few innocent comments beneath her post. Where's Liam? Didn't you guys take a family trip? Why isn't your husband in any of these pictures? At first, Olivia likely brushed them off, rolling her eyes, thinking people would just accept whatever picture she painted. Victoria probably scoffed, waving a hand dismissively, thinking they were above explanation. But the internet has a way of noticing when something doesn't add up. And once people start sensing a lie, they start digging. A trickle turned into a flood. Wait, Liam's not there. Isn't he just a little kid? Hold on, why is your husband missing too? Something feels off about this. By the time Olivia woke up the next morning, her notifications were on fire. Hundreds of comments. People asking, questioning, demanding answers. And the more she ignored them, the worse it got. Because people aren't stupid. They saw through the carefully curated narrative. An avoidance that only made them more curious. I could already picture her reaction. Panic. Scrambling. Frantically trying to control the narrative. And sure enough, she did exactly what I expected her to do. He tried to spin it. I could see her now, sitting by the pool in Hawaii. Phone gripped tightly in her hand, her heart racing as she typed out a caption, her perfectly manicured fingers shaking with frustration, desperation creeping into the edges of her facade. And then she posted it. A selfie, her expression carefully measured, her smile just a little too tight, her caption crafted to look effortless, when in reality it was anything but. Sometimes life throws unexpected challenges at us. We wanted a full family trip, but unfortunately things didn't work out as planned. Liam is safe and happy with his dad, and we are making the most of this time together. Family means love no matter where you are. It was a textbook. A desperate attempt at damage control. But there was one problem. People weren't buying it. Instead of sympathy, her post received something she had never expected. Backlash. She never saw it coming. The storm she had unknowingly set in motion had now grown into a hurricane, tearing apart the carefully crafted image she had built for years. So you just left your kid behind? The words echoed like a relentless drumbeat in the comment section, spreading like wildfire across social media. Noah is safe and happy but wasn't invited? That's messed up. What kind of mother does that? You could have easily changed the ticket if you actually cared. Did your husband not go because of this? The internet had turned against her. For the first time in her life, Olivia wasn't in control of the narrative. The power she had wielded with such ease, the illusion of being the perfect wife, the devoted mother, the impeccable daughter, was slipping through her fingers like sand in a storm. But this wasn't just about Olivia anymore. The whispers weren't just confined to her. Victoria's reputation, once untouchable, was now burning alongside her daughter's. The woman who had spent decades perfecting her image, an emblem of class, sophistication, and power, was now being scrutinized under an unforgiving light. She abandoned her own grandson. The words were venom, spreading in hushed conversations at country clubs, at exclusive business dinners, in the high-end circles where Victoria had once commanded attention and admiration. Can you believe that? If she treats her own family like that, how does she treat her clients? This isn't the kind of woman we want to do business with. Her empire, once a fortress built on fear and control, was now crumbling beneath the weight of scandal and disgrace. And then, just as I had predicted, the panic call came. My phone rang in the middle of the afternoon, the screen flashing Olivia's name. I let it ring once, twice. Then I answered, but I didn't speak first. Why are you doing this? Her voice was sharp, desperate, but beneath it I could hear it, the tremor of panic. Good. Doing what? I asked, leaning back in my chair, my voice calm, controlled. You know what? She snapped, frustration bubbling over. Everyone is attacking me online. Why are you letting this happen? I almost laughed. Letting this happen? I wasn't letting anything happen. She did this to herself. I stayed silent, letting her stew in the weight of her own actions. And then finally she cracked. I didn't think people would react this way. She muttered, her voice faltering. I smirked. Oh, you thought they'd just accept that you abandoned your own son and move on? She sucked in a sharp breath. Look, I know you're upset. Upset? I repeated, my voice turning to ice. Olivia. I was upset when I watched my son cry in that airport. I was upset when you laughed at his pain. Now. I exhaled slowly, deliberately. Now I'm just watching you deal with the consequences. Her breath hitched. I could feel her unraveling on the other end of the line. Please, she said, softer now. Just say something online. Tell people it's not a big deal. They'll believe you. And there was the desperation. She didn't care about Noah's feelings. She didn't care about what she had done. She only cared about how it made her look. I exhaled slowly, letting the silence stretch between us like a final curtain falling on a play that had gone on for far too long. No one word. Pulled. Unyielding. The death sentence to every ounce of control Olivia thought she still had. She gasped. A sharp inhale, the sound of a woman who had never truly faced the weight of her own actions. What? Her voice cracked, disbelief laced with desperation. You heard me. My voice was steel, unshaken, unbothered. You made your bed, Olivia. Now lie in it. And with that I ended the call. No more second chances. No more cleanup crew. No more saving her from herself. This was the beginning of the end. That was the moment Olivia realized she had lost. Not just control, but everything. The illusion of her perfect, polished life was cracking, shattering, crumbling into dust at her feet. People weren't admiring her anymore. They were mocking her, judging her, turning their backs on her in the same way she had turned her back on her own child. And the best part? This was only the beginning. While Olivia and Victoria had been parading around Hawaii, blissfully ignorant, sipping on overpriced cocktails and bathing in their own arrogance, they had no idea what was happening back home. No idea that the empire they had built on manipulation, greed, and cold calculation was already on fire. No idea that their reign was ending, and when they finally noticed, it would be far too late. 3 days into our trip, as Liam and I sat in a cozy diner, enjoying the simple pleasure of a breakfast filled with laughter and an absolutely absurd amount of syrup on his pancakes, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen, expecting yet another desperate attempt from Olivia, but no, this was different. The name flashing across my screen made me smirk. Not Olivia. Not Victoria. Julia. Olivia's younger sister. I let it ring twice, savoring the moment before picking up. Hey, Julia. My tone was light, casual, as if this was just another peaceful morning, as if I didn't already know exactly why she was calling. You need to come back. The words burst from her in a rush, her voice tight, urgent, like she had been holding them in for hours. I leaned back, taking a slow sip of my coffee. Come back. I repeated, feigning confusion. Something's wrong with the company, she hissed. Victoria is losing it. Clients are backing out. Something happened with the accounts. I don't know all the details, but she's panicking. Olivia is panicking. Everyone is panicking. I set my cup down, tilting my head slightly. Right on schedule. And this has what to do with me. Julia hesitated. That split-second pause was all I needed to know. She knew. Look, she said carefully, I know things have been bad between you and Olivia, but the company? I interrupted smoothly, my voice dripping with the same amusement I knew would set her on edge. The company was never mine. That's what Victoria always reminded me, right? It was her business. Her empire. Her legacy. I was just the guy handling the finances. A sharp intake of breath on the other end. Julia had always been smarter than her sister. She knew exactly what I was getting at. A whisper. Barely audible. Wait, you did something, didn't you? I leaned back, watching Liam stab his fork into his pancake, completely unaware that his father was currently dismantling an empire with nothing but patience and silence. Did something? I repeated, my tone effortlessly calm. No, Julia. I just stepped back, like Victoria always said I should. Silence. Then barely there, oh my God. The domino effect. Victoria's entire business had thrived because of me. She may have had the connections, the charm, the ruthless ability to manipulate people, but I was the one who kept it standing. For years I had managed everything. Taxes, payroll, investments, liquidity. She made reckless business decisions, but I was always there, fixing them before the damage could spread. And then in that airport, when I saw the way she and Olivia had laughed at my son's pain, I made a decision. I wouldn't fight them. I wouldn't argue. I would simply walk away. And once I did, everything started to fall apart. It started small, almost unnoticeable. A routine tax audit flagged a few inconsistencies in Victoria's reports. A frustrated client, tired of delayed payments, pulled out of a multi-million-dollar contract. A real estate investment, one I had previously protected from volatility, suddenly began hemorrhaging money. And then, the business account was frozen. Not by me. By the government. Because the moment I pulled out my personal shares, the financials no longer made sense. Victoria's accountants scrambled to fix the numbers, but it was too late. They were already under investigation. Julia's voice came back, frantic, shaking. Look, I don't know exactly what you did, but Victoria is losing it. I've never seen her like this. And Olivia, she's freaking out. Because people are turning against her online. I smiled. Good. Julia let out a frustrated breath. Are you serious? The business is about to collapse. The lawyers are involved. The IRS is looking into things. This is bad, man. I'm sure it is, I mused. You have to come back, she pleaded. Victoria is demanding you fix this. I chuckled. The audacity. Oh, now she wants me back? I said, shaking my head. After all these years of treating me like a necessary inconvenience? After telling me I was lucky to even be part of her family? After leaving my son behind like he was nothing? Julia's breath hitched. I get it, she said quickly. I do. But you can't just let them fall apart like this. I leaned forward, resting my elbow on the table, my voice low and final. Julia. I'm on vacation. Vacation, she practically screeched. With my real family. I added smoothly, then before she could utter another pathetic excuse, I hung up. Meanwhile, in their overpriced resort suite in Hawaii, I could picture it all so clearly, Olivia and Victoria pacing like caged animals, their perfectly manicured nails tapping anxiously against their phones, their faces pale, drained of their usual arrogance. Olivia, once so obsessed with the illusion of perfection, frantically refreshing her Instagram feed, watching in horror as the carefully curated image of her perfect life unraveled before thousands of judging eyes. Her fingers trembled as she tried to type yet another damage control post, but no combination of filtered smiles and fake heartfelt captions could erase the truth that was now spreading like wildfire. And Victoria? She wasn't much better. The ever-dominant matriarch, the woman who once commanded fear and admiration, was now the one scrambling for solutions, her phone buzzing non-stop with calls from lawyers, from investors, from former allies who were suddenly nowhere to be found. The moment they mocked my son, they sealed their fate. Now they were finally paying the price. The difference between us was simple. That night, while they drowned in stress, I sat on the balcony of our hotel room, watching fireworks explode over Cinderella's castle, the golden sparks reflecting in my son's wide, amazed eyes. Liam leaned against me, his small hand gripping mine, his Mickey ears slightly crooked from all the running around. Dad. His voice was soft, sleepy. Yeah, buddy. He yawned, his head resting on my shoulder. Are we gonna go on trips like this more often? I smiled, pressing a kiss to his messy curls. Absolutely. Because I had finally realized something. Olivia and Victoria were never my real family. They had been parasites, taking, draining, consuming, expecting me to always be there, always giving while they took without gratitude. But now I was free. And their world, it was burning. And the best part? I wasn't lifting a single finger to stop it. The next morning when I woke up, I did something I hadn't done in years. I took a deep breath and smiled. No tension in my chest. No stress weighing on my shoulders. No waking up to the sound of Olivia sighing in disappointment, rolling over in bed as if my mere presence annoyed her. Just peace. And then my phone buzzed. I already knew what I'd see before I even picked it up. 17 missed calls. 6 from Olivia. 5 from Victoria. The rest? Their lawyers. I chuckled. The panic was setting in. Good. Let them sweat. Victoria's empire was crumbling. I sipped my morning coffee as I flipped through my emails, and there it was. The confirmation I had been expecting. Business accounts. Frozen. Biggest investor? Gone. Paris. Now fully involved. The empire she had spent decades building, the one she had wielded like a weapon to control and manipulate, was unraveling faster than she could salvage it. And all of it? Because I simply walked away. I never needed to fight them. I never needed to destroy them. All I had to do was leave. And without me, it was only a matter of time before everything collapsed. And then Olivia's panic set in. My phone buzzed again. A new text from her. Please. We need to talk. I ignored it. A few minutes later, another message popped up. I was wrong, okay? I see that now. Just call me. Now she sees it? Now that her world is falling apart? Now that she's realizing she can't survive without me? I stared at the message for a long moment, then just to amuse myself, I typed back a single word. Why? 3 dots appeared immediately. He was typing. Fast. Desperate. Because everything is falling apart. Mom's business is on the verge of bankruptcy. The lawyers say the IRS is coming after her. I don't know what you did, but we need you to fix this. I smirked. The irony was delicious. For years, I had been the invisible problem solver. The one in the background, the one they never appreciated, never respected. And yet they had always relied on me. And now they were realizing just how much. A few hours later, while Liam and I were standing in line for another ride at Disney World, my phone buzzed again. A call. From Olivia. I let it ring twice before answering. What? My tone was casual, unconcerned, as if she hadn't just spent the last 48 hours in a complete meltdown. Her voice was frantic. My bank account. Where is my money? He finally noticed. It's gone, Olivia, I said simply. Gone? What do you mean gone? You controlled our finances. You had access. You didn't, she stopped. Because she already knew the answer. You never bothered to check, did you? I mused. A sharp inhale. What did you do? Her voice had risen now, shrill, panic overtaking her usual calculated tone. I took back what was mine. I said it calmly, almost lazily. You can't just cut me off like this, she stammered. What about Liam? At the mention of my son's name, the amusement vanished from my voice. Liam is fine, I said, my tone turning to ice. Said, my voice dark, each word a blade cutting through the last shreds of her illusion. He's safe. He's happy. Something you never cared about. That's not fair. Olivia snapped, her voice rising, but I could hear the quiver beneath it, the unmistakable tremor of someone who was finally realizing she had lost. I was just trying to have a good trip. I didn't think. No, I interrupted, my tone turning to ice. You never think, Olivia. That's the problem. And with that I hung up, severing the last lifeline she had desperately tried to grasp. And for the first time I didn't feel guilty. That night the phone rang again. This time it wasn't Olivia. It was Victoria. The woman who had built an empire out of fear, control, and manipulation now sounded like a ghost of herself. Hollow, powerless, desperate. I debated ignoring it, letting her stew in the consequences of her arrogance, but curiosity got the better of me. I picked up. So you finally decided to speak, I said smoothly, stretching back into my chair. There was no arrogance in her tone now, no sharp edge of superiority, only a tremor, a shaking breath. You win, she whispered, and I could almost picture her jaw clenching as she forced out the words. Is that what you wanted to hear? I smirked, savoring the moment. I don't know, Victoria, I mused, tilting my head. What exactly do I win? She inhaled sharply. I could hear her nails tapping against something, perhaps the polished mahogany of her desk, perhaps the hollow remains of her pride. Fine, she exhaled, her voice brittle. I'll apologize. I'll do whatever you want. But we need you to come back. I laughed, a slow, deliberate sound that made her silence stretch like a taut wire. The company, she continued, her voice now laced with the edge of panic. You know it better than anyone. You can fix this. The company? I repeated, mock curiosity in my voice. Oh, you mean your company? Your legacy? Your decisions? I let the words settle before delivering the final blow. I thought you didn't need me. Silence. A beat, then another. Then, you took me for granted, Victoria, I continued, my voice steady, controlled. You thought I was just some fool you could use. And the moment you didn't need me anymore, you and Olivia threw me away like I was nothing. It wasn't like that, she snapped, and for the first time, there was something raw in her voice. Not power, not dominance, but something much weaker. Fear. It was exactly like that, I corrected, my tone cold and precise. The silence stretched again. Then she did something I never thought I'd hear from her. Please, she whispered. I need you to fix this. I closed my eyes, letting that word sink in. Please. The mighty Victoria Monroe reduced to pleading. The woman who had treated me like an accessory, an afterthought, now begging for my help. I'm sorry, Victoria, I said, feigning sincerity, my lips curving into a slow smile. But I'm on vacation. With my real family. And with that I hung up. Because for the first time in my life I realized something. I never needed them. They needed me. And now they were about to learn what life was like without me. A week after Liam and I returned home from our trip, the doorbell rang. Not once, not twice, but frantically, as if someone was trying to claw their way inside through sheer desperation. I already knew who it was before I even looked through the peephole. Olivia and Victoria. The women who once carried themselves like royalty now stood outside looking like shadows of their former selves. Disheveled, desperate, broken. Olivia clutched her designer purse like it was the last expensive thing she owned, her mascara smudged, her hands trembling. Victoria, once the untouchable matriarch, the queen of control, had an expression I had never seen before. Defeat. I took my time opening the door, savoring the moment, letting them stand there in the cold. Let them wait. Let them feel what it was like to be discarded, ignored, just as they had done to my son. Finally, I pulled the door open, leaning lazily against the frame, arms crossed. What do you want? Olivia exhaled shakily, her voice fragile. Please. We need to talk. Victoria, ever the proud one, kept her gaze lowered, but I saw the tremor in her hands, the way her breath hitched. The power was gone. The confidence was gone. Good. I tilted my head, watching them squirm. I told you, I said coolly. I'm done cleaning up your messes. Olivia stepped forward, eyes wide and desperate. I made a mistake. I see that now. We shouldn't have left Liam behind. We weren't thinking. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Oh no, Olivia. You were thinking. Exactly the way you always do. Selfishly. Her face twisted, shame creeping into her features. But before she could say another word, Victoria finally spoke, her voice sharper, more controlled. What do you want? She demanded, trying to salvage what little pride she had left. We'll do anything. I raised an eyebrow, letting the weight of her words settle between us. Anything. I repeated, the ghost of a smirk curling my lips. That's rich coming from you, Victoria. The last time I checked, I was nothing more than a lucky inconvenience to your family. Victoria inhaled sharply, her pride warring with her desperation. Olivia clutched my arm, her voice cracking. Please. I don't know what to do. Everything is falling apart. And she wasn't lying. The news had already spread. Victoria's empire had collapsed. Bankruptcy was imminent. Clients had abandoned her. Investors had pulled out. And her properties? They were bleeding money faster than she could stop it. And her perfect reputation? Destroyed. Olivia wasn't faring much better. The money was gone. Her social life? Ruined. The friends who had once showered her with praise had vanished. Overnight. Neither of them had anything left. And now they had no one else to turn to. I stepped back, letting their words sink into the empty space between us. I wanted them to feel the silence, to feel the power shift. Because for the first time in their pathetic, entitled lives, they weren't in control anymore. I was, and they knew it. The divorce papers. My final declaration of freedom. I reached inside my house, fingers brushing against the cool envelope resting on the entryway table, and pulled it out. Olivia's eyes flickered, a desperate spark of hope igniting, but the moment she saw the contents, her face crumbled. Divorce papers. Her hands trembled as she took the envelope, her knuckles white against the crisp edges. You're ending this, just like that? Her voice was barely a whisper, the disbelief laced with something else, fear. I nodded, my gaze unwavering. No, Olivia. You ended it the moment you laughed at your own son's pain. The words struck like a whip, her lips parting as if to protest, but no sound came out. She tried to summon the charm, the fake innocence, the manipulation tactics that had always worked in her favor. But this time they failed her. She had nothing left. No wealth. No status. No control. Victoria let out a sharp, frustrated breath, stepping forward like a queen who had just realized her crown was missing. "This is ridiculous," she hissed, her voice strained, her carefully constructed composure cracking. "You're willing to throw everything away over some petty revenge." I tilted my head slightly, studying her, letting her words settle between us before I echoed, "Petty revenge?" My voice was calm, too calm, laced with something razor-sharp, something dangerous. Victoria's expression twisted in irritation. "You think this makes you look strong? Leaving your wife? Letting your son grow up in a broken home?" And that was the final straw. I took a slow, deliberate step forward, my voice dropping to a lethal whisper, slicing through the space between us like a blade. "No, Victoria. You broke this home. You raised a daughter who saw her own child as disposable. You taught her that money was more important than love. You did this. Not me." Her mouth opened but no words came out. Because she knew. She knew she had lost. She knew this was over. Olivia let out a shaky breath, her fingers tightening around the papers as if holding on to them would stop the inevitable. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice breaking. I met her gaze, steady and unwavering. "You sign, and then you leave." Her eyes filled with tears, unshed and glistening, but she didn't argue. She didn't fight. She just nodded, her fingers trembling as she took the pen from my outstretched hand. And in shaky, uneven strokes she signed. Just like that, it was over. Olivia exhaled a broken, trembling breath, staring down at the papers like she still couldn't believe it. "So that's it," she whispered. I nodded. "That's it." I turned to Victoria, who stood stiffly, her hands clenched into fists at her sides, her jaw tight with restrained fury. She thought she could control this. Thought she could manipulate me one last time. But now she was powerless. And she knew it. I exhaled slowly, stepping back inside my house, my hand resting lightly on the doorknob. "You can leave now." Olivia's face crumbled completely, but I didn't stay to watch it. I didn't need to. I closed the door, firm, final, and I didn't look back. The end of an era. I leaned against the door, listening to their footsteps retreat. Listening as they realized that the world they had built, the empire of deception, control, and illusion, was gone. I took a deep breath, letting the silence settle around me. For years I had felt trapped in that marriage. Trapped in that toxic family. For years I had let them belittle me, mock me, treat me like I was nothing. But now I was free. And they were the ones left with nothing. I walked into the living room where Liam was sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by a fortress of Legos, his face lighting up the moment he saw me. "Dad, look. I built a castle." I smiled, kneeling beside him. "That's amazing, buddy." Because this was what mattered. Not money. Not power. Not manipulation. Love. The best revenge isn't destroying someone, it's watching them destroy themselves. The divorce papers were signed. Olivia and Victoria were gone. And for the first time in years, my house, my home, felt like mine again. No more suffocating tension. No more waking up with a pit in my stomach. No more walking on eggshells, bracing myself for Olivia's sharp remarks or Victoria's disapproving stares. Just me and my son. And peace. We settled into a new normal. Breakfasts filled with laughter instead of passive-aggressive silence. Mornings where Liam didn't have to whisper or walk carefully, afraid of setting off his mother's impatience. Evenings spent building forts, telling stories, making memories. And most importantly, Liam was happy. But I knew it wasn't over. Not completely. Because the moment Olivia had walked away from my doorstep with those signed papers in hand, I knew what was coming next. Custody. And if I knew Victoria, and I did, she wasn't going to let Olivia give up that easily. Which was exactly why, a few days later, when my lawyer called and said, "Olivia wants to discuss custody privately," I wasn't surprised. The meeting that changed everything. We met at a quiet cafe downtown. Neutral ground. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a small corner table, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. She looked different. Not in the way she usually did after a long night out, when her hair was perfectly styled and her makeup was flawless to mask exhaustion. No, this was real. Her hair was pulled back into a simple ponytail. No designer handbag. No flashy jewelry. Just a woman who had finally run out of tricks. I sat down across from her, watching as she took a slow, measured breath before speaking. "I don't want to fight anymore," she said softly. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. Really? That's new. She flinched but nodded, swallowing hard. I know. I've made mistakes. I let out a short, humorless laugh, shaking my head. Mistakes? You laughed at our son when he cried, Olivia. This isn't about mistakes. This is about who you are as a person. She bit her lip, her fingers tightening around her coffee cup as she stared down into the swirling liquid as if searching for answers she knew weren't there. I know. And for the first time ever she actually looked ashamed. The Olivia I knew never admitted fault, never let her perfect mask slip, but now there was no mask left to wear. She swallowed hard and looked up at me, her voice barely above a whisper. I want to share custody. I studied her, my expression unreadable. Why? Her jaw clenched. Because he's my son too. I shook my head slowly, the weight of the truth settling between us. That never stopped you from leaving him behind before. The words hung in the air like a noose tightening around her carefully chosen excuses. Her hands trembled slightly as she exhaled, her voice breaking just a little. I know, but I don't want to lose him completely. And there was the real reason. She wasn't fighting for Liam because she had suddenly decided to be a good mother. She wasn't here because of some grand epiphany about motherhood or redemption. She was here because she was losing everything else. No money, no business, no reputation. And now the last thing she had left, the last thing she could cling to, was slipping through her fingers. I took a slow, measured breath, choosing my words carefully. You don't deserve to have him half the time, Olivia. She tensed, her breath hitching. But I won't keep him from you completely. Her lips parted slightly, surprise flickering in her tired eyes. Noah is old enough to see people for who they are, I continued, my voice steady, unyielding. He's already starting to understand what kind of mother you've been. And if you want him in your life, it's not going to come from a court order. It's going to come from you actually proving to him that you care. Tears welled in her eyes, her lower lip trembling as she whispered, I do care. Then prove it. I leaned forward, my voice dropping lower, firmer, cutting through every excuse she had left. No more lies. No more manipulation. No more treating him like a trophy. When it's convenient for you. She nodded quickly, wiping at her eyes as if she could erase the years of damage she had done with a single gesture. But I wasn't finished. And one more thing, I added, my tone hardening. He looked up, wary. Victoria stays out of his life. Her face paled. You can't. I can, I said firmly, leaving no room for negotiation. And I will. She opened her mouth to argue, to fight, but then she closed it. Because she knew. She knew that Victoria had destroyed everything, and she wasn't going to let her take Liam down too. After a long pause, her voice barely above a breath, she whispered, okay. I studied her for a long moment, searching for the cracks in her usual armor, waiting for the moment she'd try to manipulate me again. But for the first time I didn't see it. No games. No arrogance. Just defeat. Maybe, just maybe, she was finally learning. The beginning of a real family. After that meeting something changed. Olivia didn't try to manipulate Liam's affection anymore. She didn't try to use him as a pawn in some twisted game of revenge. Instead she actually made an effort. She started showing up to his school events. Not because she wanted to impress her friends, but because she genuinely wanted to be there. She started calling, not to argue with me but to talk to her son. And Liam started seeing the difference. He still preferred staying with me most of the time, and that was fine. But at least now, when he was with his mother, he wasn't just another accessory in her perfectly curated Instagram life. He was her son. And that was more than I had ever expected. The final goodbye to Victoria. One evening, a few weeks later, my phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. I cut her off. For the first time, a smile curled at the edge of my lips after reading one of her messages. He had finally done it. Victoria was gone. No more controlling influence. No more toxic whispers dripping with manipulation. No more shadow of a woman who had dictated Olivia's every move. Just Olivia standing on her own, really trying to be a mother for the first time. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Because deep down I already knew she had finally made the ultimate choice, and maybe, just maybe, she was better for it. Months later, as I stood in the backyard watching Liam race across the grass, his laughter ringing through the air as he chased the dog, something settled deep in my chest. Not bitterness, not anger, just peace. Olivia had learned her lesson. Victoria had lost everything. And Liam, my son, Liam finally had a home filled with love, not conditions. And that was the only victory that had ever mattered. Because sometimes revenge isn't about watching people burn. Sometimes it's about building something stronger in the ashes. The silence in my house was different now. It wasn't the suffocating quiet that used to hang between Olivia and me, thick with unspoken resentment. It wasn't the heavy weight of a love that had long since withered, the kind that left the air feeling cold no matter how warm the room was. No, this silence was different. It was peaceful. It was the sound of a house no longer filled with judgment, no longer a battleground of power plays and passive-aggressive remarks. It was the sound of freedom. Best of all, it was the sound of a home that finally felt like my life without them. It had been months since Olivia signed the divorce papers. Months since Victoria had been cut from my life like a disease I should have treated years ago. And in that time, everything had changed. For the first time in years I could breathe. No more waking up to Olivia scrolling through her phone in bed, her eyes casting silent judgment with every glance. No more last-minute demands for extravagant dinners, expensive gifts, or social events that felt more like business transactions than a marriage. No more Victoria looking at me like I was lucky to be tolerated in her daughter's life, as if I were some accessory she had graciously allowed into her kingdom. They were gone. And yet I had never felt more whole. Building a future for Liam. First I worried. Would he feel the absence of his mother? Would he blame me for how things had turned out? Would he see my choice as something cruel rather than something necessary? But then I saw something in him that I hadn't seen before. Happiness. It was as if an invisible weight had lifted from his small shoulders. He no longer had to tiptoe around his mother's moods. No longer had to brace himself for the sighs, the disappointed glances, the subtle but sharp reminders that she was too busy, too distracted, too everything else to give him the love he deserved. Dad, he laughed more. He played freely. He stopped flinching when he spilled something, stopped looking over his shoulder like he was waiting for a scolding that would never come. And when he was with Olivia, something even more surprising happened. He set boundaries. He no longer begged for her attention. He no longer accepted being second place. And that was all I had ever wanted for him. For him to know his worth. To understand that love wasn't something you had to fight for. It wasn't something you had to earn. It was something you were given freely simply because you deserved it. The moment it hit me. One evening I sat on the couch watching Liam play with his Legos. His tiny fingers worked diligently, his tongue sticking out in concentration as he carefully stacked each piece, lost in his own little world. And then out of nowhere he looked up at me and grinned. Dad, you're happier now. I blinked, caught off guard. What do you mean, buddy? He shrugged, turning back to his Legos, assembling something only his imagination could see. You laugh more now. You used to be sad a lot. I opened my mouth, then closed it. Because he was right. I had been sad for years. I had let myself exist in a life that drained me, convinced myself that this was just how things were. That it was better to stay than to start over. I had accepted misery as normal. But now, I was free. I was free, and the most surprising part? My son had seen it before I even did. I reached out and ruffled Liam's hair, my fingers brushing through the soft strands as if grounding myself in this moment, this new reality. You know what, buddy? You're right. His grin widened, eyes twinkling with the kind of knowing only children seem to possess. Told you. And just like that, it hit me, this was it. This was the life I was meant to have. A life without toxicity, without manipulation, without people who saw me as nothing more than a resource to drain. A life where I could breathe without fear of judgment. Where I could exist without walking on eggshells. A life where I could be myself. Where I was enough. What happened to them? I hadn't heard from Victoria in months, hadn't seen her name flash across my screen, hadn't felt the suffocating weight of her control pressing down on me. Her empire, that carefully curated kingdom of deceit and domination, had crumbled beyond repair. Her reputation, ruined. The once untouchable woman, the one who held power over others like a puppeteer with marionettes, had been reduced to nothing more than whispers at country club luncheons. And the best part? She had done it to herself. She had thought herself invincible, unshakable, untouchable. She had believed, truly believed, that she could manipulate her way out of anything, that she could bend the world to her will. But when the foundation of an empire is built on lies, deception, and greed, it is not a question of if it will collapse, but when. As for Olivia, she had changed. Not completely, people like her never fully change. But she had learned. She had lost everything she thought mattered. The money, the power, the perfect image. And in the aftermath, in the wreckage of her old life, she had been forced to rebuild something real. She had stopped trying to impress strangers online, stopped chasing an illusion of success that had never been real to begin with. And for the first time she had actually started being a mother. She wasn't perfect. He never would be. But at least now, she wasn't using Liam as a prop in the glossy, artificial performance that had once been her life. He was trying. And that was enough. The freedom of moving on. One afternoon as I was grocery shopping, scanning the shelves for Liam's favorite snacks, I saw her. Olivia. standing at the end of the aisle. We spotted each other at the same time. For a moment I thought she would turn, walk away and pretend she hadn't seen me. But instead she did something I hadn't expected. She nodded. Not in arrogance. Not in forced, superficial politeness. Just a nod. A quiet, unspoken understanding. We had both moved on. I returned the nod and kept walking, my footsteps light, my heart unburdened. Because I didn't need anything from her anymore. Not an apology. Not closure. Nothing. As I had already won. The best revenge. They say the best revenge is living well. And for a long time I didn't believe that. For a long time I thought victory had to be loud, had to be seen, had to be felt by those who had wronged me. But now I understand. The best revenge wasn't in their suffering. It was my joy. She never expected to say, I know I'll never fix what I did, but I want to be better for him. I want him to have a mother he can be proud of. Her voice, usually laced with arrogance and self-importance, was different now, shaky, uncertain, raw. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the stars beginning to dot the darkening sky. Maybe she really had changed. Maybe losing everything had finally forced her to see what truly mattered. But did it even matter anymore? Then be better, Olivia, I said, my voice calm but firm. But don't do it for me. Do it for him. A sharp inhale, a pause, and then a soft, yeah, I will. And for the first time I believed her. The best choice I ever made. After I hung up, I stepped outside, the cool night air wrapping around me as I watched Liam chase fireflies across the yard. His laughter was a melody, a reminder that this simple, beautiful life was all I had ever needed. Dad, look. They glow, he called out, his face illuminated by the tiny golden sparks floating around him. I smiled. I see that, buddy. He ran up to me, breathless and beaming. Can we catch some and keep them in a jar? I knelt beside him, ruffling his hair. We could, but you know what? They're happiest when they're free. He thought about that for a moment, then nodded. Yeah, I guess you're right. And just like that I realized I was right too. For years I had been trapped, convinced that I had to stay in a life that wasn't mine, shackled to people who only knew how to take. But the moment I chose freedom, the moment I chose Liam over the illusion of a family that had never really been mine, everything changed. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to watch them suffer. Because the real victory wasn't in their downfall. It was in this moment, in the laughter of my son, in the peace I had finally found, in the love that had never once required me to prove my worth. I never expected to hear those words from her, never expected the steel-cased woman who once laughed at our son's tears to finally sound human. I know I'll never fix what I did, but I want to be better for him. I want him to have a mother he can be proud of. Her voice trembled, not with manipulation, not with an act, but with something real, regret. I studied her words, weighed them like fragile glass in my hands, wondering if they would shatter under pressure. Maybe she would change, maybe she wouldn't. But for the first time it didn't matter. Then be better, Olivia, I said, my voice even firm. But don't do it for me. Do it for him. A breathless pause and then, yeah, I will. And for the first time in years, I heard something in her voice I had never heard before. Sincerity. I didn't wait for more. I didn't need to. As I had already moved on. The best choice I ever made. I stepped outside, the night embracing me like an old friend, the sky painted with constellations of fireflies. Dancing in the dark. Dad, look. They glow. Liam's laughter rang through the yard, pure, unburdened joy. I smiled. I see that, buddy. He ran up to me, breathless, his face illuminated by the tiny golden orbs floating around us. Can we catch some and keep them in a jar? I knelt beside him, running my fingers through his soft curls. We could, but you know what? They're happiest when they're free. He thought about that, his small brows furrowing in deep concentration, then he nodded. Yeah, I guess you're right. And just like that I realized so was I. For years I had been trapped, a prisoner of obligation, shackled by the illusion of love that was nothing more than a transaction. I had convinced myself that leaving meant losing, that walking away meant failing, that breaking free meant giving up. But now I knew the truth. The moment I chose freedom, the moment I chose Liam over a life that suffocated me, everything changed. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to see Olivia or Eleanor suffer. Because the real victory wasn't in their downfall. It was in this moment. In the fireflies glowing like tiny lanterns in the night. In the weight that had lifted from my chest. In the small, laughing boy who had never stopped believing in me. In the home I had built from love instead of sacrifice. And for the first time in a long, long time, I knew. I had made the best choice I ever could. I had chosen us. And we had won. Thank you for your time, and don't forget to keep an eye out for more stories coming soon. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us keep creating the content you love. Join our community and stay tuned for more amazing stories coming your way. Hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. Thanks for being part of our journey. If you haven't already, please like and follow for more amazing content. Your support keeps us going, and we will strive to bring you more thought-provoking and heartwarming stories. Until next time, take care and stay curious.